Well, hello and welcome to More to the Story with Molly White. I'm so glad you joined me again today for another great episode. And before I get started in introducing my guest today, I just want to let you know that my awesome, wonderful co host, Mary Browning, is not able to join us today, but she is on a mission and she is out there representing us. And so I can't wait for her to get back and tell us all about her experiences. We always talk about the harms of abortion on this show. We have testimonies of women and men who've had abortions and talking about the effect it had on their life, not only physically, but spiritually, mentally, psychologically, emotionally. And then we started thinking, let's branch out. What's the root cause of abortion? Well, mostly is sexual immorality and having sex outside of marriage. And then, of course, another factor is the failure of birth control. And birth control is not 100% effective in preventing pregnancies, and it's not always good for you. And I recently came across a video of a Dr. Patrick Flynn who was talking about some of the health risks involved with an IUD, which I didn't have any idea. Now, I've got a lot of research on every birth control method, but not the IUD. And I thought, wow, this would be a great opportunity if I could get Dr. Flynn on here to educate us on the health risks involved not only with the IUD, but other birth control methods. So hence, that's why I have Dr. Patrick Flynn on as my guest today. Dr. Flynn is a chiropractor and the founder of the Wellness Way. We want to have good health and in every way, not just dietarily, but in every way. So he is a highly sought after speaker and best-selling author with educational training from numerous learning institutions, including Palmer College of Chiropractic, the University of Wisconsin Green Bay, the University of Wisconsin Marinette, Scott College, Northwestern Health Sciences University, the National University of Health Sciences, and of course, and the courses at Harvard Medical School. You kind of remind me of my cousin, Dr. Patrick. He's got several degrees and doctorates. So in the Harvard Medical School, HMX Fundamentals Online Certificate Program in Immunology, Virology, and Vaccines, and Health and Wellness, designing a sustainable nutrition plan. Pioneering a different approach to healthcare, he has trained chiropractors, NDs, nurse practitioners, nurses, surgeons, pharmacists, health restoration coaches, and others. His network is now comprised of over 60 clinics seeing people from all over the world. Welcome to the show, Dr. Flynn. Thank you for joining us.
Molly, it's an honor to be here. Thank you for having me.
So, what got you started in I would say, whole health? I know chiropractic, I see a chiropractor all the time, but what got you started in this field?
Really, I was a kid that was diagnosed, and actually, to give you an example, exactly what my mother gave a great comment on one of my shows one time was they diagnosed me as a troubled child, and so there was physical and psychological things I dealt with as a kid, and then I had some major immune problems, and then the system failed me dramatically. So therefore, I went into more of the natural realm and had great success. And then I just built my education around that and started to actually put some things together for everybody, knowing the fact that, we have a current form of healthcare system and people should have options and choices. And so therefore it just came from a personal experience. And then getting into as I was going through college, I met my wife who, it's been 24 years going on 25 now. And she was very ill, had a lot of hormonal issues. And then I started in conventional medicine, everything had failed her dramatically. So I started to figure out some of the major hormonal things. And obviously now we have four beautiful baby girls. Actually, one's almost graduated from chiropractic school, but now, obviously obviously older now. But the idea is this: it just came from a very big demand of me being sick as a child, my wife being sick, and the failure of what happened in our current medical system. So we just went in a different direction.
Well, that's awesome. And it's always powerful when it's a personal experience that gives you the passion to do something. And I know personally for me, I've been very disappointed in our current medical system because of failures in my own history, one with abortion. How can a medical field say abortion is good for women when it's very harmful for women? And so that kind of discouraged me. And then I started seeking more alternative medicines when I need. So, and it's just because I know there's other things out there, which at the time, most people don't know there's alternative forms of medicine. And then you start thinking, we want to get into the whole health for your whole body, spiritually, physically, emotionally, and then we draw a passion from that. So, the video that I watched you that just really got me excited to have you on was you were talking about the long term, maybe, or even short term risks of an IUD. And of course, women are told, oh, it's an easy form of birth control. We insert it, no problem. And when I heard your video, I thought I was shocked. So, can you please kind of start us off, since we're going to be talking about birth control methods, some of the risks involved with the IUD?
Yeah, and in order to know the risk, you have to understand how it works, and that's why when you even ask, women just on oral birth control, they said, "Well, it affects my hormones." Well, like, how? Because if you ever start to understand the mechanism of action, all these things, it kind of freak you out a little bit. So, for example, it's a copper IUD. Copper by nature is very, damaging to sperm. So it's a spermicide, and that's well known. The copper ions, remember, it's just a copper wire wrapped in. The copper ions actually have a negative effect on it. They actually damage them. And that's okay. I understand what they're trying to do. They're trying to use a spermicide. But the part that really concerns me the most, and actually I want to talk a little bit about my background really quick that way. Uh, I had immune issues once again when I was a kid. That's what stemmed my aspect of actually having some go back to my degrees to in immunology and then also nutrition. Then I went to career school. And actually, no joke, I was literally taking a quiz before I got here. I'm currently in medical school right now. I'm finishing my master's degree in immunology, and then I'm going to go to the PhD program because here's what happens. Immunology was always my favorite subject. And so, therefore, what I did is I realized that anytime that there is a stress and a damage to the body, there's an immune response. I mean, just give you a simple analogy. If I legitimately just put a little sliver in your finger, now, once again, obviously it's not going to cause you to die, but there's going to be an inflammatory response, pain, inflammation, redness. Your immune system is going to go to that area to try to remove that damaging thing that doesn't belong within your body. Well, that's how the IUD works. What it does is number one, yes, the copper is a spermicide. All right. So it's damaging to the sperm itself. But you got to remember how it actually affects implantation is once again, the copper IUD is actually, it draws the immune system. It creates an inflammatory response on the endocrine lining of the uterus. So, in order for it to actually keep you from getting pregnant implantation on, there's an inflammatory damaging response to the lining of the uterus. And I'm sorry, the organ that brings life into this world should not be inserted with something that consistently brings an immune splinter response to the thing that can only bring life into this world. And I just said, I just don't agree with causing a damaging effect to an organ to prevent something that's so natural as pregnancy that can lead to effects short term. But once again, it also can cause some long term effects. So, and I just want women to know that whatever you choose to do, guess what happens? I'm a freedom person. I just want you to have the right to choose, but choose on information. Don't choose basically on catchphrases, safe and effective, and it's okay because my doctor said. We can look at history. Your doctor also at one time said that Camel cigarettes are the most healthy ones to smoke. We can go through history of everything doctors said for many years. And I don't think many people forgot about COVID over the last 5 years. And so therefore, as that whole inflammatory response, I just can't imagine. Imagine me every day just causing some inflammation in your finger every single day. It's going to eventually cause some damaging effects to it long term. The splinter may not be okay right now, but leave it for 2 years. There's women that are on forms of birth control for decades, and then they wonder why they have health issues.
Right. Absolutely. And inflammation, from what I understand, isn't that the root cause of just about every disease out there?
Well, I want you to think this way. Initially, it's a God given response to heal. But once your body can deal with it, and actually you will pass by it because it's a repair process, but something that is consistently damaged and constant inflammatory will lead to some pathological process. So yes, it's actually, if it left long term, it can be related to almost every disease on the planet.
And I'm taking notes here. That's why I'm looking down. So, what would be the long term effects? I think you did mention some about having an IUD. I mean, is copper toxic to your system as well?
Well, we need copper. We do. We need people realize we need metals even like iron. But see, what happens is this is there can be long-term effects to the uterus. And once again, and there's a lot of women that have it and do just fine. But the idea is this is having that chronic inflammatory response, you set yourself up now for short-term problems, but you can actually have some long-term problems that make it much harder to get pregnant. And if you look what's happening today, women, for example, are delaying pregnancy. So they're already ended up with other endocrine issues. Now they have an inflammatory response that gives them not really the greatest ability to repair the damaged area that way. So now they're setting themselves up for all the factors that now when they say, okay, now it's time to get pregnant, well, you have a affected uterus. You have an endocrine response that isn't normal. And now you wonder why even trying or even following ovulation that you can't have a baby. It's because once again, you've created negative effects on a tissue for a long period of time. It's no different than if you have a chronic inflamed finger for a long period of time, it's not going to move the same the way it's supposed to if it wasn't damaged over the course of years.
Wow, that's so good. When you're damaging your uterus, like you said, the only life giving organ for such a long period of time, it's going to have an effect on your ability to get pregnant and sustain a pregnancy. What about birth defects? Would anything like that be related to birth defects?
You know, I only want to talk like said things I know that can have data. But here's the opposite of this. If something negatively affects the uterus, anything can happen. Anything can, you know? Do you think they're gonna study it? Probably not. It's like this. It's like, we know there's certain medical procedures that cause damage, and they can even mechanistically say, "Yep, this can happen." They're not gonna study it because if it's a procedure that they do all the time, they're not gonna prove it wrong. You say, and the only way they can really prove it wrong is if they give things to like mass amount of people that they can't deny it. They're watching this with GLP-1s right now. Everybody's taking a GLP-1. Oh, it's safe and effective. Now what
Yeah,
happens, enough mass people took it that they're going, we can't hide the results it's happening because too many people have done it. So, and that's they found out with birth control. And that's why, once again, that's why they're always looking for different methods. If normal oral birth control was so safe and effective, why would they even need to look at copper IUD? Because if it was so effective, they would never have to worry about going to another form because you know why? They could take it. But once again, now that affects them neurologically and suppresses those hormones, which even on the box it says it can cause infertility, cancers, everything. So don't take my word for it. Look at the major side effects.
just read the box, read the little fine print.
Yep.
So that you
Yep.
said something interesting about, of course, we don't know the long-term effects and if it's can cause birth defects because and then they're not going to study that really because they're not going to try to prove what they thought is right wrong. But you did make a comment about, the birth control wasn't working. Then they had, de- designed the IUD to try to prevent pregnancies. And then, of course, if the pregnancy is not prevented, where do the women end up? They end up in an abortion clinic. And then if they're having a surgical abortion, my goodness, the damage surgical abortions can do to a uterus are astounding. I mean, I suffered the scar tissue. I suffered a damaged cervix. I even developed tumors. They were non-cancerous and cysts. So, but women are not being told this information so they can make an educated choice for their own health. And that's why we have more to the story, because we want you to have the information. We want you to be educated before you make a decision that could be harmful to you and you not know about it. And so,
Point, because the one thing I want women to know, there's no procedure that doesn't have risks and benefits. It's just that all you hear is all the benefits. You say, and I'm like going, wait, that's half the story. Share the whole story so people can just make an educated decision. Now, and if they, it's really interesting. Now, understand, ladies, because I'm going to talk about a nurse I know, and but just to understand, this is going to sound like a very harsh, but follow me on this, okay? I had a nurse who was very publicly, against me during COVID because once again, background immunology, everything I'm talking about that way. And she was making very negative comments. And all of a sudden she got the COVID vaccine and then she got damaged. And then she wanted to go fund me and ask me for help. I'm like going, you didn't even get all the information and you kind of, speaking a little bit abruptly with something you don't know about because they speak emotionally. You know what I'm saying? It's like, I guarantee there's people talking right now. This happens. I did the copy ID video, millions upon millions and millions of views. And there was just even comments that go, well, you're a guy, you shouldn't talk about it. I'm like, no, but my immunology background, I can sit there and go, I can show you mechanistically what it does. And then you can research yourself and make a choice. And if you're okay with the damage or the possible side effects, I'm like, do anything you want. But just don't, we have to, why is it that somebody like me has to give the other side and stuff of that? Well, the reason why I do give the other side is because because my whole career has been based on helping with female hormones that didn't have success in another way. So any female hormone issue, I'm going to have a conversation with and shoot a video on because now it just gives women the choices before they even get there.
Amen. And just like the doctor said, we're here to give you information, to educate you, not to stop you from doing this or that we're anti birth control. We are just anti the fact that you're not given all the information about the health risk and the long term health risks the longer you stay on birth control. So we want you to make informed decisions about your health and your well being. So, what about oral contraceptives? And we know, and I've learned that for short term use, they're not too bad. But for long term use, like you mentioned earlier, decades, how can that affect a woman's health?
Well, I remember, I'm going to correct you a little bit. Birth control, oral birth control is actually classified as an endocrine disruptor. Let me ask you a question. When is it ever good to endocrine disrupt a woman? See, so the concept of, and actually think about it this way, there's physical and psychological consequences that come from endocrine disruption. And therefore, and they can be long term due to the fact that they suppress your hormones long enough that some women can't recover. Or on the flip side, they can create such other endocrine disruptions that they do lead to other major negative health effects. And that's why they started to move into other forms of birth control. Because, like I said, I want women to understand this. When they come out with birth control, hormone suppressing one, they're like, "Oh my goodness, this is great." But then over time, you can't avoid some of the major things that you're trying to say are not happening because it's going to come out eventually. And it might take 10, 20, 30, 40 years, which happens with a lot of things. And then what happens is now what they do now is they suppress their endocrine system so much. And actually, women do not realize this. Yes, do you know how oral birth control actually works? It's a neurological suppressor. So therefore, LH and FSH, and therefore, guess what happens? And I find it interesting to when your catchphrases, because we always heard it. And when I was going through school and everything, oh, it tricks your body pregnant. No, it doesn't. But always heard that. Well, it tricks your body pregnant. It doesn't trick your body that you're pregnant. It suppresses your neurology. Now, that comes with other negative consequences, both physical and actually mental. But see, they won't want to talk about that because you know why? And also, even what it even affects in your thyroid. And that's when you look at all the negative side effects. There's no way that you can endocrine disrupt a woman back to normal.
Wow. Wow, that is fascinating. I had no idea about all that too. I do have here some of the health risks, every one of the birth control methods except for the IUD. But the point is too, and I've learned this, I've invited some of the top breast cancer researchers and breast cancer surgeons to speak at some UN conferences that I've attended. And what I learned there is the younger you start a teenage girl or even a preteen on birth control because of period, help the cramping, reduce the kind of pain and cramping and bleeding. The longer she stays on it, the higher her risks is of developing breast cancer. And I'm sure there's other cancers too. It could be uterine, it could be cervical. But if you add family history of breast cancer to that scenario, it increases your risk even more. If you add an abortion to that scenario, it increases your chances even more. But this is information, Dr. Flynn, that women are not getting when they go to the doctors and get on birth control, or even if they're going back for routine checkups and their doctors know they've been on them for decades. It's still not information that women are given, that this is, the long term risks, like you mentioned earlier, are catastrophic and you cannot reverse them.
And I want people to do this because we're seeing this a lot in medicine right now. Is everybody's talking about the long term risk? There is very negative short term risk too. See, we're downplaying that because once again, they'll say, well, correlation is not causation. It's like this. It's like, I can tell you this. I've dealt with this thousands of times in my career. Um, they can give a drug, have massive side effects. They can give vaccines and child has seizures, autism right away that way. And they'll say it's correlation, it's not causation. It was going to happen anyways that way. But the minute that somebody takes an herb, the doctor's screaming that caused everything. You say, and it's like it's kind of funny. Is like there's major short term effects that do happen,
Right.
and they just don't look at it that way, and they stand it long enough because they don't represent, and because all of a sudden, when there's physical and psychological things that happen to women when they're doing endocrine disrupting things, instead of taking them off right away, they're like, well, it'll balance itself out and things like this, and it's very common for that to happen. Somebody explain to me when common is actually normal. You saying? It's like, don't confuse common with normal because everybody
Oh,
got a side effect doesn't mean it's normal. It's just very common.
That's good. Common doesn't always mean normal. I wrote that down. That's very good. So, with me and learning about these different side effects, short term, yes, of course, and long term of birth control, I started thinking, okay, well, what are some alternatives for women out there and men? And, one of the things I learned too about birth control is it could lead to divorce because woman doesn't want to get pregnant and the man does, or vice versa. So it could cause even relationship problems, marital problems. But as far as other alternatives to birth control, there's natural family planning. And I'll have another episode on that with some experts on that. But there's other things that you can do to temporarily prolong pregnancy, that are healthier and follow your body's natural cycle. And it's all about timing and keeping up with your body's natural cycle, which is not going to be harmful to your body. And it's just as effective as taking artificial birth control, but it doesn't have the risks involved. So that's something that I wanted to make a comment on. Now, Dr. Flynn, what other information would you like our listeners to understand about these health risks, and of course you said how it can really damage the possibility of future pregnancies?
Yeah. So, what I want to talk about is two things because you probably have never heard my view on abortion, and I'm going to talk about it and how I came to my conclusion. But before we get into that, let's talk about natural family planning in a way. I can honestly tell you, I've had 4 daughters, and once again and they're all planned. Now, once again, now you say, "Well, what other form of birth control did you use? Use a condom?" "Nope." "Do this?" "No." And, but let me explain. Now, I will tell you this, having a wife that was extremely sick and had endometriosis really bad, and this is just me. I speak at a lot of places, even churches, and I try to get all the Christian men to understand that say, "Listen, your body is much more simpler than a woman's body, much more simpler, okay? The changes that a woman goes through in the month are dramatic compared to what we go through. And then yearly, and then their cycles are different through they have different stages of life. We all have childhood years. We hit puberty and we basically maintain puberty all the way to the day we die. Women have that the women become cyclic and they move into the menopausal stage, which is different. They have that window of time that they can actually, give birth and everything until they transition to a different hormonal state that way, aka menopause. And menopause is not a disease, guys. They've actually tried to treat it like it's a disease, and it's treated like it's a horrible, horrible situation. But the main reason why it is because your endocrine health through your childhood cyclic, and by the time you get to menopause, you've been misled so long that you don't even know what normal hormones are. You get to menopause, it's horrible for you. Now, I try to teach men. Remember, as you choose to marry that woman, just understand that you need to understand her cycle at a high level. Because if you do, and that's the whole concept of natural family planning, there's only a short window where a woman can roughly get pregnant. And so I could tell you legitimately every day of my wife's cycle, from the time we were married till on. I knew what day she would start menstruating, this. And if anyone was thrown off, I knew there was some stressor that did it that way. And so I knew that window and stuff. And so therefore it was very easy for me to actually track that and go, okay, listen, as she gets close to that fertility time, once again, either once again, it had to be a little less sassy. We'll leave that for the PG crowd and stuff of that. So idea is this, because no joke, I literally had an Amish couple. She was 33 and she was on her 12th kid. And I had to look at the guy and say, okay, listen, I need to teach you some things so you don't keep getting her pregnant. And some of the things he was talking about, he was just scratch his head and stuff of that. Uh, because I have to say this. I want you to think about this. Even the thought process, birth control, there's nothing you can control about it. There's no natural birth control. You have times you're fertile and times you're not. So this concept of natural birth control, people say, and if you want to use a condom, great. If you want to use a cervical cap, great. I can honestly tell you, for the men in the Christian world that really drive me nuts, this happens like crazy. Men are just like, well, I'm not going to use a condom. I'm like, well, once again, you're just being selfish. And if you don't want to do it, then be careful around her fertility times because you just do have a small window. Okay. And because I am so against, you watch any of videos, I'm so against messing with the female body. So against it. Guys, no, I don't have a vasectomy. I don't have a vasectomy, but I don't have one. Well, then guess what happens? I'd rather have you get a vasectomy than somebody else actually, the wife doing a copper IUD, some form of birth control, because there could be major negative consequences. The worst thing that happened to you with a vasectomy, there can be some side effects. There's just a lot less chance of that happening. All right. So it's very simple if you put the effort in to understand your wife's cycle. And it's like, well, I'm a man. Well, great. What do you want a lot of? Sex. Then put the effort into it. You know what I'm saying? And that was just easy for me to do. And then see my staff laughs because I'm yelling at all the guys going, just understand your cycle. It's that important. Sex is important to a marriage. So then we both participate in this thing called marriage, this thing called sex that allows us to actually know each other's body. Okay. Now, I will tell you this. So I will tell you, until I got big time, until I got big time into understanding the female body, I actually didn't care about abortion. Okay. And people say, well, doc, but you're a Christian person. I'm like, absolutely. And I'm also a freedom person. So it's like, but here's the point. I want you to think about this. I want you to think about these years. Okay. If you look at, you know, a man's body, when they have puberty, obviously there's testosterone. Our fertility can maintain from the day we have puberty till the day we die. Okay. And guess what happens? We have one physiological change that happens when we're roughly 13 years old. And let's give it a range of 3 or 4 years. Okay. But I want you to take you through the steps of a woman's body to where they have their childhood years, then they turn cyclic. And then once again, they have the fluctuations of their hormones every single month. And there's a pattern that carries from roughly 13 to 51. Okay. Those are your cyclic years, ladies. Now, years ago, it used to be 16 and it's getting younger and younger. And there's a whole nother reason why that happens. But the idea is this. And then you have the menopausal years, which now there's a transition out of fertility. Okay. And you can maintain your sex characteristics and everything with certain hormone levels, but you don't have the same hormone levels because you don't have to worry about, developing a child. But I want to show you there's one time where the female body totally transforms. Totally transforms. And it
Mhm.
doesn't happen at 10 weeks. It doesn't happen at 12 weeks. It doesn't happen at second and third trimester. It happens the minute that the sperm hits the egg. The female body, by design, and I will tell you this, I can honestly tell you, I didn't even actually really understand God until I became a doctor. Because there's no way that this body actually just happened by chance. Do you know what I'm saying? I'm sorry. You can't understand the human body and understand that. And I do have a funny, and I'm going to keep it all PG. People say, and I've had scientists say, well, doc, you don't believe in the Big Bang Theory? I said, yes. Yes, I do. I said, here's what happens. Me and my wife had 4 big bangs. We have 4 child. Okay. And I'm like, come on, that is funny for my PG crowd that way. And so it's like this happened by accident, or 2 particles came together, and this whole organization. Remember, I was talking to my daughter about this just the other day. She goes, Dad, tell me why you truly believe in God. I said, it's really simple. You can't have organization without intelligence. That's a universal principle. Even atheists will agree with that. So there has to be an organizer. So I sit there going, so this whole organization process from young ladies to cyclic women to menopausal women, it's intelligent design. And so therefore, there's a massive intelligent design that happens the minute that egg hits the sperm. And then it carries on, and the woman's body transitions both physically and mentally to maintain that pregnancy. And if you rip it out, you understand, you throw that whole intelligent design off. Because, for example, I just had a woman reach out to me because she had a blighted ovum. Was, for example, everything looks like she's pregnant, but inside the baby's not developing. And so they went in and they did a procedure to remove it. And I'm okay with that. Okay. But now the body's like, oh my goodness, what just happened? And now they want to use birth control and hormone therapy to suppress what the body has now transformed, and saying, oh my goodness, I'm stuck in this state. And it's kind of like, I need some time to do it. And she wanted some support and some things that we could do. So she ended up on hormone therapy. And so I sit there and going, you understand that a woman's body, the minute that egg touches the sperm, so if you pull that baby out 6 days later, it throws that female body off into the body into complete confusion and chaos and disorganized, to where they want to manipulate it with hormone therapy to try to get your body. I'm like going, that's not supposed to happen.
Yeah.
That's not supposed to happen. I'm like, because if the baby leaves and exits properly, that it's meant to now through that whole process of birth. That's why even C-section, it's tougher for a woman to actually respond. So we're going to do it in the middle of development and think that this is a natural process. And I'm like, I can't support that. And I can't support something that says 10 weeks. I can even show you, once again, we know this is just the development of a baby, that there is certain things that happen right away. But I'm saying egg hits the sperm, guess what happens? There's a female transformation of her physically and psychologically.
Yes.
And that only happens. And if you don't get the sperm touching the egg and fertilization, the woman would never experience those changes. So I can't understand why people say, well, it's only a fetus. Well, what are you defining it by? Because if you define it by the woman's change in her body, that happens from the connection, that
Right.
spark when the sperm hits the egg. So I'm like, life starts right there. I just can't end that life.
Amen. Thank you. That's beautiful. And I haven't heard it explained that way, but it was just really resonated well with me. But I do know that the argument, well, it's just a clump of cells. Well, we're actually all just a clump of cells. We're just put together in a really neat vessel, and you become, soon as that egg is fertilized, from what I understand, Dr. Flynn, we don't stop developing until we're around the age of 21, if I'm correct, because and then at that time, once we stop developing all the way, then we start declining. Is that correct?
Let me correct you a little bit there. You understand that skin cells that you woke up this morning, they'll be gone by tonight. Those cells regenerate. You're constantly regenerating, constantly. You
Right.
saying? So for example, it's like, our body. Now, what they really meant to say is this: men roughly between 21, 22 years old, they hit a certain stage of development to where there's no more growth. Women, it's about 25 and stuff like that. So there's just a little bit of range, and neurologically they talk about that way. That does happen. The brain, has now reached its maximum growth capacity. But you understand, every organ in your body regenerates if it can, but it can't properly if your endocrine is disrupting. It can't properly regenerate when you actually have an IUD in causing harm. Now you're putting even more taxing on this great intelligent creation. And I can honestly tell you, that's what led me to God. That was because I never stepped foot into church until I met my wife and stuff like that. Not a joke. My first 20 some years of life. And then all of a sudden I'm like going, there's a massive intelligent design. And then understand the whole hormonal system. I'm like going, that life starts that connection, sperm and egg. And so actually with my background, I started to go, this made so much sense to me. And then I should start sharing it to people and going, well, it's physiological sound, it's scientifically sound, rationally sound. And here we go. And I'm fascinated with the female body because it's just such a complex, a bunch of gears working together and changes. And there's physical and mental changes that complexity goes up and down. And it's made my appreciation. And maybe that's why God gave me 4 daughters. You saying? Because I can understand them well.
Well, let me tell you, I used to joke that there's really three genders. There's man, woman, and a pregnant woman, because she is totally different. Like you were saying, our body starts really changing so much to help create or sustain this life, to nurture this life, and to bring this life into the world. And our bodies really just go through incredible changes. And like you said, it's just a miracle to develop another human being in your own body.
And knowing that beauty, that just stop with that beauty right there. How can we put something in there, like a copper or a D, that the only way that you can stop that development of the egg and sperm and things like that is by damage, is by inflammation, is by irritation. I'm sorry, why are we irritating the life-giving organ? Now, yes, the body all works together, but I just can't. I'm sorry. And I just said that on video. Half the world loved it. Half of them attacked me like crazy. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, I just can't. I just can't understand doing that to a uterus. I can't understand doing it to really any part of the body for any purpose. But it's like, man, I want to make sure I have the best oven there is on the planet so I can make the best organic gluten-free bread. What if I started to beat the inside of it with a hammer and be like, whatever comes out, comes out.
Yeah, making it all
You know?
rusty and yeah, rusty and damaged and yeah.
I know I have some weird ideas and stuff like that, but I just think it's sound.
No, I love it. And I really personally I want to thank you for taking such a strong stance and an interest in the woman's female body from a man's perspective and even educating men about it. Because it is so complex and different. And boy,
It
and then I
is.
know hormonal balance. I may have you back sometime just to talk about the importance of hormonal balance in our bodies. Cause when you're off that way, boy, it can cause all kinds of trouble. But we're out of time, but I do want you to close. Go ahead and close.
Yeah, that's what I want to say. I said, ladies, just understand, you know, you have a period of time to where you can give birth. You do. I just want women to take care of their body so they can have the greatest birth experience and also the healthiest child. And so do everything you can to support good hormonal health, support good uterine health. Learn your body, have your husband learn your body. So therefore, when you choose to get pregnant, that you set yourself up to have the greatest experience because all of the manipulation, all of the surgeries, all the alteration can cause some really damaging effects to the family. And I want you to have a great experience when it comes to this. And I can talk to you from my own personal self that way, to where my wife was diagnosed to be infertile. And we disagreed with the world what it said. And obviously we proved that wrong. And that's why I even have my career. How did I go from a simple country boy to having clinics all over the country, even in Europe? Because all these concepts made sense and then we could show it that way. So take care of it because it can be a great experience.
Amen. Thank you so much. Now, Dr. Flynn, where can people get in touch with you?
As long as they don't kick me off social media, which happened many times, social media, thewellnessway.com, drpatrickflynn.com. And I just put just a lot of free information for women and men, but so they can just make choices themselves for all their healthcare.
Amen. Well, I certainly want to tap into the wellness. Is it the Wellness Center?
Way.com.
Wellness
Nope,
Way.
just
Wellness Way, and we will definitely have that on our screen when we put this on for everyone to see. But thank you so much for your time. We did go over, but I do appreciate it because I wanted to keep having you on. But thank you for that wealth of information. And I hope everyone out there has learned from this and is eager to learn even more by getting in touch with the Wellness Way and Dr. Flynn. And thank y'all for tuning in to More to the Story with Molly White. We look forward to seeing you again next time. God bless you all. Bye bye.